Here's something almost nobody talks about. The 1970s didn't end with a bang. There was no war that took it from us, no single law, no villain you can point to. It just slipped away quietly, one ordinary thing at a time. And by the time anyone looked up to notice, it was already gone. That's the strange part. We didn't lose the 1970s in some big dramatic moment. We lost it the way you lose your car keys. Not all at once, but in 100 small ways you never tracked. And here's the thing that should bother you. Most of what disappeared wasn't taken from us. We handed it over ourselves. We even said thank you. By the end of this, you're going to understand exactly what got traded away, while everyone was looking the other direction. You'll be able to name it. And I'd bet money you'll remember at least one thing you forgot you ever had. Something so ordinary back then that nobody thought to miss it until it was too late. But before I get to the biggest one, the trade that changed everything, the one that almost no one saw coming, let me take you back to an ordinary evening, because that's where the whole thing hides. It's a Tuesday in 1976 on a quiet street in Dayton, Ohio. Nothing special about it. That's the point. You're a kid, or maybe you're the parent. The screen door is propped open because the evening's warm, and the air feels good moving through the house. Somewhere down the block, somebody's dinner is on, and you can smell it. Onions, maybe a roast, drifting 3 houses down like it belongs to everyone. The phone is mounted right there on the kitchen wall, with a cord long enough to stretch into the hallway if you need privacy. And outside, every kid on the street is still out there, bikes dropped in the grass. A game of something going in the cul-de-sac. Nobody's worried. The only rule is the streetlights. When they buzz on, you come home. None of this was supposed to be remarkable. Nobody filmed it. Nobody wrote it down. It was just Tuesday. And that is exactly why nobody noticed when it disappeared. Now here's my promise to you. By the time this video is over, I'm going to show you the one single thing underneath every one of these losses. The real thing we gave up, the thing all the others were just standing in for. It's not what you think. It's not money, and it's not the good old days. It's something you can still get back, in part, tonight. But you have to see the whole picture first. So if you want to be there when it all connects, subscribe to the channel right now, before you forget. Because this is exactly the kind of thing we walk through here, together, every single week. Hit that button and stay with me to the end. You'll be glad you did. Now let me be fair before I go any further. 1970s were not perfect, and nobody's pretending they were. Inflation was brutal. Gas lines wrapped around the block. There was real fear and real hardship, and plenty of things worth leaving behind. I'm not here to sell you a fairy tale. But here's what's true at the same time. Even with all of that, the average family had something we've quietly lost. And it starts with a paycheck. In the mid-1970s, a single income could run an entire household. One person worked. The other ran the home, or didn't have to scramble for a second and third job just to break even. And this isn't a rose-colored memory. The numbers are right there in the record, the US. Census Bureau put the median American family income in 1974 at $12,840. A house in that era cost somewhere around 2 to 3 years of that income. Compare that to today, where the median home runs over $400,000, roughly 5 times what a typical household earns in a year. Back then, a man working a line in a plant in Flint, Michigan, or driving a truck out of Pittsburgh could buy a house, raise 3 kids, and take a week at the lake every summer. That wasn't rich. That was normal. That was the floor, not the ceiling. And here's the number that really tells the story. In 1972, the husband was the sole breadwinner in about half of all American marriages. By the early 1990s, that had collapsed to just 23%. Pew Research has tracked it. 50 years ago, the husband was the main breadwinner in 85% of marriages. Today it's down to about 55%, and in nearly a third of marriages both people now earn about the same. Because they have to. We didn't add a second income because we got greedy. We added it because somewhere along the line one stopped being enough. And that does something to a person you can't measure in dollars. It's the feeling of solid ground. The feeling that if you just showed up and worked, the basics were handled. That feeling is mostly gone now, and we replaced it with 2 incomes, 2 commutes, and a tiredness that never fully lifts. Then there was the phone, the one on the wall. Here's the thing about it that we never appreciated. It couldn't follow you. When you walked out that screen door, you were unreachable. Gone. Off the grid, except nobody called it that, because being unreachable wasn't a problem. It was just Saturday. If somebody needed you, they'd try later, and the world somehow kept turning. There was a peace in that we didn't even know we had. Your time was actually yours. Nobody could reach into your pocket, and pull your attention out of your own life. We gave that up so cheerfully that we paid money for the privilege of never being unreachable again. And here's where I have to stop and tell you the thing I promised at the start. The biggest trade. The one almost nobody noticed. We didn't lose all of this to some enemy. There was no thief. The truth is harder than that and stranger. Every single thing we lost, we traded away on purpose, and we traded it for something that looked like a gift. We traded the single income for more opportunity. We traded the wall phone for being reachable anywhere. We traded the corner store for lower prices. We traded knowing our neighbors for the freedom to keep to ourselves. Every one of those trades looked smart at the time. Every one of them came wrapped like a present. Convenience, choice, connection, progress. Who says no to those? So we said yes. We said yes to all of it. And the bill came later, in a currency we didn't know we were spending, time, ground under our feet, the names of the people who lived next door. We didn't read the fine print because there wasn't any. We just signed. And that's why nobody noticed. You don't notice a robbery when you're the one handing over the goods, smiling, thinking you got the better end of the deal. Sit with that for a second, because it changes how you see everything else in this video. Nothing here was stolen, it was sold to us and we were the eager buyers. So let me ask you something, and I genuinely want your answer down in the comments. If you could take just one of those trades back, just one, which would it be? The single income? The unreachable phone? Something else entirely? Drop it below. I read them, and thus promise you're not going to be the only one who picks what you pick. Now let's keep walking, because the small stuff is where it really lived. Take the corner store. Not a chain. A real one, with a real person behind the counter who knew your name, and your father's name, and which brand of cigarettes your mother smoked, and that you were good for it until Friday. The hardware man who could tell you which screw you needed by the sound of how the old one had stripped. You didn't go there because it was cheaper. It usually wasn't. You went there because going there meant something. You were a person, not a transaction. He'd ask about your bad knee. You'd ask about his boy who just shipped off. That whole exchange took 90 seconds and it stitched a town together. We traded it for a few cents off and a checkout screen that asks if we want to leave a tip. Nobody knows our name there. Nobody asks about the knee. There was a book that ran right through the middle of all this, and almost every house had one. The Sears catalog. It came in the mail, thick as a brick, and it was the whole world between two covers. You didn't scroll. You sat down with it, the whole family sometimes, and you turned the pages. The kids dog-eared the toy section months before Christmas. Your mother circled a coat. Your father studied the tools. It was a wish book, a dream you could hold, and when you finally ordered something, you waited weeks for it to come, and the waiting was half the joy. The day that box showed up on the porch was an event. We traded the wish book and the wait for a button that says buy now and a box that shows up tomorrow, and somewhere in there, the wanting stopped meaning anything. When you can have it instantly, you stop dreaming about it first. And the dreaming, it turns out, was the best part. Then there was the thing we've lost that's hardest to even describe to a younger person. The empty Saturday. A whole day with nowhere to be, no alerts, no schedule. No little buzz in your pocket reminding you of the next thing. You woke up and the day was just open. You might fix the fence, you might not. You might drive somewhere with no plan and end up at a fishing hole you'd never seen. The day belonged to you in a way that's almost impossible now. We have filled every empty minute with something that glows, and we call it staying connected. But ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you had a Saturday that was actually empty? When did you last have a day no one could find you? That's two things I've planted now that I haven't fully answered. What exactly made being unreachable feel so good, and why an empty day mattered so much? Hold on to those. I'm coming back to them at the end, and when I do, they're going to connect into one single thing we lost that's bigger than all the rest. You'll see it. And speaking of having nowhere to be, there was the Sunday drive, no destination. That was the entire point. After church, after the big midday meal, the family piled into the car and just went. Down the back roads of Indiana or out past the farms of Pennsylvania, windows down, no plan and no clock. You weren't going anywhere. You were just going. Gas was cheap enough that an afternoon of aimless driving cost almost nothing, and the reward was simply being together, moving, looking out the window at the country rolling by. Nobody in that car was anywhere else. There was no second screen, no notification, no real quick thing to check. Just the road and the people you loved. We traded the Sunday drive for $4 gas and lives so scheduled that going for a drive with no destination sounds, to most people now, like a waste. It wasn't a waste. It was the whole point. Music was another one. You didn't carry 10,000 songs in your pocket. You owned a record, a physical thing, with a sleeve and artwork big enough to study while the music played. You waited for it. You saved up, you drove to the store, you flipped through the bins with your fingers, and you brought home one album. And because you only had a few, you actually listened to them all the way through. You knew every crack and pop on your favorite record because you'd played it 100 times. Or you waited by the radio with your finger on the tape button, hoping they'd play your song so you could catch it. There was a hunger to it, a patience that made the music mean more. Now we have all the music ever recorded, instantly for the price of nothing, and most of us couldn't tell you the last album we listened to from start to finish. We got everything, and somehow it's worth less. If any of this is landing on you, if you keep nodding, or you keep getting that little pull in your chest, go ahead and tap the like and the subscribe button. It's a small thing, but it's the difference between this little memory making its way to someone else who needs it tonight, and it just disappearing. You doing that one tap is you saying this mattered. And it did. Here's another one almost nobody talks about. We used to fix things. When the TV broke, you didn't throw it away. You either opened the back yourself and looked for the tube that had burned out, or you called the TV repairman, and he came to your house, in your living room, and fixed the thing right there. When your shoes wore out, you took them to the cobbler, and he gave them another year. The toaster, the radio, the lawnmower, all of it was built to be opened, understood, and repaired. Things were made to last and made to be saved. We traded that for cheap and disposable. Now when something breaks, the repair costs more than buying new, so we just throw it out and order another. We lost the cobbler, we lost the repairman, and quietly we lost the idea that the things we own are worth keeping. There was a place that pulled the whole town together after dark too, the drive-in. You loaded the kids into the back of the station wagon in their pajamas, hung the speaker on the window, and watched the movie under the open sky. Half the families there were doing the same thing. The kids fell asleep before the second feature. The snack bar smelled like popcorn and warm asphalt. It wasn't really about the movie. It was about being out, together, under the stars, with the whole community parked in rows around you. And this one we can measure exactly. American drive-ins peaked in 1958 at 4,063 of them. At the giant Ford Wyoming in Dearborn, Michigan, cars lined up by the thousand. Today, only around 300 drive-ins are left in the entire country. We traded the open sky and the shared night for a screen in every separate room. The movie got more convenient, the togetherness got lost, and then, the neighbors. This might be the one that hits hardest. You knew them. Not all of them deeply, but you knew their names, their cars, their kids, their schedules. You knew the Hendersons next door went to church Sunday morning, so you kept the mower quiet till noon. You knew which house to run to if you got hurt and your folks weren't home. There was a constant low-level contact, a wave from the driveway, a chat over the fence, a borrowed cup of sugar that was never really about the sugar. None of it was deep, all of it was constant. And that constant casual contact is the thing that made a street feel like a neighborhood instead of just a row of houses where strangers happened to sleep. Today, study after study finds most Americans can't name the people who live 2 doors down. We didn't decide to stop knowing them. We just got busy, got fenced in, got our entertainment piped in through a screen so we never needed the porch anymore. And the names faded one by one, the dinner table held all of it together. 6 o'clock, more or less, everyone showed up. Not because there was a rule carved in stone, but because that's just what you did. The table was the anchor of the whole day. You sat down, all of you, and you talked. About nothing, about everything, about the thing that happened at school or at the plant. There were no screens at the table, because there were no screens to bring. Nobody was anywhere else. You were all just there in one room for that 1 hour every single day. And here's where you can watch it slip in real time. The researcher Robert Putnam found that from the mid-1970s to the early 1990s, exactly the years we're talking about, family dinners got rarer in every kind of household as 2 working parents and tangled schedules pulled the table apart. And look at the gap it left behind. Today, about 74% of Americans over 50 say they had regular family dinners growing up. Among the youngest adults, it's down to 38%. That hour did something quiet and enormous. It told every kid at that table that they belonged somewhere. We traded it for schedules that don't line up, for eating in the car, for everyone in a different room with a different glowing rectangle. The table's still there in most houses. It's just that we stopped all showing up to it at the same time, and the summers. If you grew up then, you know. Summer felt like it lasted 1,000 years. You left the house in the morning and you were just gone. Out on the bike, down at the creek, in somebody's backyard, building something or breaking something. Your mother didn't know exactly where you were and didn't need to, because the whole neighborhood was watching, and the only hard rule was the one I told you about at the start. Be home when the streetlights come on. No one tracked you on a phone, no one needed to. You had something kids today can barely imagine, real wide-open freedom and the deep trust of adults who let you go have it. That freedom is mostly gone now. We replaced it with safety we can monitor on a screen, and maybe that's smart, maybe the world really did change. But something got lost in the trade, and any kid who lived it can feel the size of it. Which brings me back to those two threads I left hanging, the unreachable phone and the empty Saturday. Here's what they were really about. Here's the one thing underneath everything in this whole video. What we lost wasn't the phone or the store or the record or the empty day. Those were just the shapes it took. What we actually lost was the ability to be fully where we are, to be in one place, with the people in front of us, with nothing reaching in to pull us somewhere else. The wall phone gave us that. The empty Saturday gave us that. The Sunday drive, the dinner table, the corner store, the summer streets. Every single one of them was a way of being completely present in your own life. Unsplit. All that's the thing that slipped away. Not in one moment, not because of one enemy. It dimmed slowly like a porch light nobody remembers switching off. One evening it was on, warm and yellow over the steps, and the bugs were circling it, and the whole street was lit just enough. And then years went by, and one night you looked over and it was dark. And you couldn't for the life of you remember when it had gone out. Nobody turned it off on purpose. It just faded, the way the whole thing faded. That's why most Americans never noticed. There was nothing to notice in the moment. Just 100 small trades, each one sensible, each one wrapped up to look like a gift. And only now, standing here looking back, can you line them all up and finally see the shape of what we handed over. But here's the part I promised you at the very beginning, the part that isn't sad. That presence, that being fully where you are. It's the one thing on this whole list you can still take back. You can't bring back the corner store or the wall phone. But tonight, you can put the glowing rectangle in another room and sit at the table with the people in front of you, all the way there, nothing pulling you out of the moment. That's the trade in reverse. That's the porch light back on. So here's the only thing I'll ask of you, and it's not really a favor to me. If something in this took you back, if you found that one thing you forgot you ever had, tell me about it down in the comments. Tell me the single one that hit you the hardest. I want to know. And if there's a person in your life who'd remember every bit of this, who lived that same Tuesday evening on that same warm street, send this to them. Not for me, for them. Because the one thing we can still do, the one trade we can still make in the other direction, is take a minute to remember it out loud, together, before it fades all the way. The porch light doesn't have to stay off. Sometimes you just have to remember where the switch was.